was another fatal shooting of a man by a police officer in Atlanta, Georgia. The man who was killed, his name was Rayshard Brooks. He was killed by Officer Rolfe here. You can see pictured. And people are, getting outraged about this. People are upset with everything that's been going on. It's just more fuel in the fire. People are coming out with their opinions on the subject, It's what you would expect to see. People on one side claiming that, this officer killed an innocent man, wasn't justified, should lose his job, charges should be pressed. Then there's people on the other side that are saying this is, justified. The officer was at risk of harm, injury, or possibly death. And people are sticking to their guns. I don't know how many of them have watched the footage and seen everything that happened, but people already have their opinions formed on it. And I think it's important that people get the whole story and people understand that this is not a black and white issue. And I don't mean with regards to race. I mean with regards to clearly who's in the right and who's in the wrong. It's a little bit more complicated than the whole George Floyd case with Derek Chauvin. I mean, there it's pretty clear that Chauvin's in the wrong, kneeling on his neck for over 8 minutes. I don't think anyone contests that that was wrong. This is a little harder because it's a peaceful encounter for around 40 minutes from start to finish. And then in the matter of just seconds, there's a struggle and the man gets shot. And a lot of decisions are made in that small window by both parties. Some good decisions, some bad, some it's hard to tell. So let's read CNN's take on the situation here. And then I'll read another article here on the charges that might be brought against the officer, and then we'll discuss the actual footage and what happened. So let's get into it. So Rayshard Brooks' final moments were caught on video, and here's what the footage shows. So they address the protests and stuff going on. We get down to the description of the encounter. According to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, police responded to Wendy's reports that a man was asleep in his vehicle in the drive-thru. The beginning of the incident is seen in the footage from a body camera worn by Brosnan. Now, before we continue, this is the first link I will post in the description, the long 40-minute video. This is the first officer on scene, Brosnan, his body cam footage. The footage shows the officer arriving at the scene and approaching Brooks' vehicle in the drive-thru line. According to the timestamp, it's 10:40. Brooks is apparently asleep behind the wheel, and Brosnan knocks on the window to wake him up, and the officer opens the door and says to Brooks, "Hey man, you parked in the middle of the drive-thru." At first, Brooks does not appear to respond. This is accurate. When he does not wake up, Brooks appears disoriented and incoherent, and Brosnan asks him whether he's tired and tells Brooks to pull over into a parking spot. Eventually, Brooks moves the vehicle after some more prodding from the officer, who had to wake Brooks a second time. That is also true. To reference the video footage, the officer is very patient, comes over multiple times, opening the door. The guy keeps falling asleep, eventually gets him to pull out of the drive-thru he was parked sideways in and go over to a parking spot. So Brosnan approaches Brooks' parked vehicle and asks him whether he's been drinking. Brooks tells the officer he had only one drink, and by the way, he says, "I had a margarita." As Brooks searches for his license, Brosnan radios to make requests for an officer to perform a DUI test. They have a little bit of a conversation, asks where he's visiting from. Brooks says, "My mother's gravesite." Brosnan says, "I'm sorry to hear that." By the way, there's a whole conversation. I don't know if CNN just wants to get the part for sympathy here with him saying he's visiting his mother's gravesite, but he talks about stopping to get burgers, and they were out for a birthday party, and they were out celebrating, and he was hungry again. They ate. He says all kinds of different things. So there is way more. That's why I said watch the 40-minute video. There's a ton of stuff. It's not just this, but this is a clip that CNN has included here. A few minutes later, Rolfe arrives on the scene. After a quick explanation from Brosnan, Rolfe begins questioning Brooks as to how he got there. Brooks insists he doesn't remember being in the drive-thru line and appears he doesn't know where he is. So, to be clear, it doesn't just appear he doesn't know where he is. He literally says he's somewhere that he's not. It doesn't just look that way. He is confused. He thinks he's next to this one highway that's not there. He thinks he's in another city, another town, and there's a hotel near there that's not, in different places. He keeps getting it wrong, and the officer asks him multiple times. Not until right before they do the breathalyzer test and whatnot does he actually get a hold of where he's at after the officer told him. Because the officer told him, "You're in Atlanta, here's where you're at." And then finally the guy realizes it later on. So, a few minutes after 11 p.m., Rolfe begins a field sobriety test. Brooks asks, "What should I do, sir?" After several tests, Rolfe asks Brooks how he feels on a scale of 1 to 10. "I feel kind of good, sir," Brooks says. Rolfe then uses a breathalyzer on Brooks, who explains he had been drinking and that it was his daughter's birthday. "I think you've had too much to drink and been driving," Rolfe says. "Put your hands behind your back." That is a very interesting take on what happened. They say, they brush over a lot of stuff. Again, watch the video. The officer has him go through these tests, asks him multiple times. The guy can't even get a grasp on what happened. He doesn't know how he got in the line. He doesn't know where he's going. When he asks him on a scale of 1 to 10 how he feels, he goes into this long story. The officer had to ask him 3 times, I think. The second time he says, "Oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sober are you? 1 sober or 2 completely inebriated?" He goes, "Oh, definitely a 10. And he's like, "I don't think you understood my question." He goes, "Oh, a 1, or I'm sober." So he's definitely out of it. The officers are very, very patient. They're very calm, keeping everything peaceful. The guy's clearly out of it, not just some calm man who's like, "Oh, I'm good, I'm fine, thank you." He's out of it. And he's been trying to drive, keep that in mind. He's fallen asleep at the wheel multiple times. So definitely not in a condition to be driving. But we get to the struggle. As Rolfe attempts to handcuff Brooks, a struggle ensues. It's hard to discern what's happening in the footage captured by the cameras because both fall off. This is true. So Rolfe determines, this guy needs to be taken in. He's not fit to drive. So he goes to handcuff him, and both body cams show like a struggle, and they fall on the ground, and then the body cameras fall face up. They're looking up at the sky. So you have to go off the dash cam footage, and it shows the officers' cruisers, 3 men are showing 3 men on the ground struggling with each other. The footage from Rolfe's dash cam shows Brosnan readying his taser. That's the first officer. As Rolfe holds Brooks from behind, they say, "You're going to get tased." Another video filmed by a bystander shortly after the struggle starts and shows Brooks grab the stun gun. So we do have confirmed that the, intoxicated man, Brooks, grabs the stun gun from the officer. "Hands off the effing taser," one of the officers says. "Hands off the taser." The struggle continues as one of the officers says, "Stop fighting." Eventually, Brooks gets hold of the taser, breaks free, stands up, hits Rolfe in the face. So he takes the taser and assaults the one officer, Rolfe. Well, Rolfe steps back, pulls out his own taser, fires on Brooks. I don't know if he hits him or not. Brooks runs away. Rolfe chases after him. This is when we switch to the Wendy's cam footage because all the other cameras are no longer focused on them. This one has no sound. It's just kind of a store camera that's up on or restaurant camera. It's up on the wall. So it addresses the Wendy's camera. In the surveillance video released by the GBI, most of Brooks' encounter occurs just out of frame, but as Brooks... Okay, so they come into view, the surveillance camera followed by Rolfe. Both are carrying tasers at this point. Now, this is where everything goes down in this matter of seconds here. Other than the struggle we saw, we had that. Now we're in this few second window of where the bad stuff happens. So what happens is, as he follows Brooks, Rolfe is seen switching the taser from his right hand to his left, and then he reaches for his gun. At that moment, Brooks turns back at the same right around the same time there. Brooks turns back and appears to point the taser at Rolfe. You can clearly see this in the video, and it actually looks like he fires. There's a flash on the taser, or maybe it's a weird lighting effect. I don't know, but it looks like something happened on the stun gun, whatever it is. I don't know exactly how those work. And the surveillance camera filmed the moment. Brooks fell because Rolfe shot at him when that happened, and shows the cars pull away. Okay, they attempt CPR. He doesn't end up making it. So, all that happened there is, for the most part, they covered the story in general. They left out a lot of the details. That's why I said watch the footage, so you can have a good idea of what's going on before you form your opinions. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to those last seconds there. So now, what are we faced with? An Atlanta officer who killed Rayshard Brooks could be charged with felony murder. So they tell the story here, and Howard said that his office will consider a full range of charges, from manslaughter to felony murder. in the case and said a decision will be made Wednesday. That's coming up. So specifically, and this is a quote, I guess, here. Specifically, Officer Rolfe, whether or not he felt that Mr. Brooks at the time presented imminent harm of death or some serious physical injury. Or the alternative is whether or not he fired the shot simply to capture him or for some other reason. Howard explained if the shot was fired for some reason other than to save the officer's life or to prevent injury to him or others, then the shooting is not justified under the law. The officer's already been fired, the other one was placed on desk duty, and the police chief has resigned. So, man, this is a lot more complicated, isn't it? This is crazy. So, I like I said, I'm going to post each of these body cam footages and the Wendy's footage. I don't have the dash cam footage. But you'll see this scenario play out. An entire peaceful encounter for 40 straight minutes. And then an altercation, and in a matter of a few seconds, decision made to shoot him. Now, the reason I want people to, watch all this and look at this a little bit differently is it's not like the George Floyd case. And people are going to be all over this officer saying, made a terrible decision here. And we all have the hindsight, right? We saw the encounter play out. We're like, yeah, the guy died. He shouldn't have died. It's a terrible thing when anyone dies. But you go back to a moment of a few seconds, and that officer in that moment had to process these things. He had to process, okay, I am chasing this man down. He has my taser. Here are the different things that could happen. So one, there are a bunch of civilians around in the vehicles waiting in the drive-thru, and that guy is running from him. He makes the decision to fire his weapon. What are the negatives here? He could hit someone, an innocent bystander that's not involved at all. Brooks might not have posed a threat whatsoever. He was just running to get away, and there was no need to fire and kill him. Maybe there wasn't a threat to the officer's life whatsoever. Maybe he was completely fine and safe. So those are reasons to not fire your deadly weapon, right? You don't want to hurt innocent people. You don't want to hurt the guy if he's not posing a direct threat to you. What else did the officer have to process in those few seconds? Well, at that time, yes, he was already reaching for his gun, and at that same time, Brooks is turning around with the taser, with the stun gun, and he points it at the officer. That officer, in those seconds, has to process, okay, what could happen here? Potentially, at worst case scenario, he could hit me with that. I could go down. He could get my firearm. It's now in my hand. It's not holstered or anything. I now have it. It's not holstered. If he hits me and that gun falls, he could have that gun. He could hurt someone else here. He could hurt my fellow officer. He could kill me. A lot of things to process right there in a few seconds. You put yourself in those shoes. I wouldn't want to put myself in that situation at all. I don't want to be in any of these situations ever. It's terrible. But to look at that and be able to say with full confidence that that officer is a, terrible man or just an awful guy who is abusing his power, I don't think you can say that about this scenario. Did he act the right way? That's going to come down to the details. And I don't think people are ever going to come to full agreement on this because it's a hard decision to make in the moment. And some people might argue, hey, if he had had better training, he would have known how to react in that scenario. And, maybe the 5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever he had to decide if he was going to shoot or not, maybe he could have been able to make that decision better if he had better training. I don't know. I don't know if that's been proven or not. And all I know is I don't want to ever be placed in that scenario where I have to make a decision like that could have such a huge impact. But I think people need to approach this with more, open minds with regards to just either condemning him or fully exonerating him. I definitely don't think there was ill intent behind it from what I've seen. You can argue that there was. Maybe people can always argue the opposite, right? You can come up with some conspiracy theory that he secretly riled him up the whole time or something. I don't know. It doesn't appear that way from the footage. Watch the whole thing. But let's not jump on and just take sides because we want to take sides. Let the investigation play out here. I hope they do an honest, good job of, examining the scenario, enhancing the footage. and talking about, talk to the officers about what was going through his head, get a gist of from both officers what was going on, the feeling of the situation, because it's a complicated issue. And it's one of those more gray areas with regards to police violence and whatnot, because this isn't police brutality for the sake of brutality. It's not someone wrestling someone on the ground and choking them out or holding them down to where they can't breathe for minutes on end because they're abusing their power. This is someone reacting to a scenario in a matter of seconds where he felt threatened. So please watch all the footage. Please have more of an open mind when looking at this scenario, and we'll watch and see how it plays out come Wednesday and see what they decide. But that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Like I said, be careful when forming your opinions. Watch the whole thing, get the full story. That will do it. If you like this video, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll keep you updated on stories regarding this and other things. And that's going to be it. We'll see you guys next time.